Right, all right. It's Friday night. Boy, has it been an amazing week of AI or what? I mean, if you haven't been keeping up, you're missing out. There's a lot of amazing things that have been happening. And what I'd like to take some time to talk about tonight is open source of OpenAI. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, look, we've got a lot of really amazing announcements, but we just absolutely, positively have to talk about this release that OpenAI dropped today. They unleashed O3. Now, what exactly is going on here? Because I got to ask, I mean, you don't suppose this has anything to do with DeepSeek, do you? I mean, it's got to be totally unrelated. I mean, it's only been dominating the news for basically the entire week. So I have to start out by giving OpenAI a lot of credit here because they responded. They definitely had something in the bag that they were ready to drop out. So we're going to take some time and just explore around O3. I've had a couple of hours to play with it tonight, put together my plan and do some other things. But you know what I find most astounding about this release? We heard rumors that this was going to happen probably about midweek. I started seeing things on social media that this was going to come. But you know what I'm actually most blown away by is how extraordinarily fast all of the changes around O3 and its release have been incorporated to all of the big names. If you're doing AI coding, if you're using search capability tools like Perplexity, if you are using cloud AI sources, all of these have been updated to effectively capture and take advantage of O3 in mere hours. So I have to give OpenAI a lot of credit because essentially what we're talking about here is they did a lot of legwork in the background to make this integration, this rollout of o3-mini go lightning fast. I don't think I have ever seen an update like this cascade through the system at the pace, at the rate of speed that this has gone out. It is, I'm just blown away. And, the other thing is how quickly they did the rollout, because oftentimes when OpenAI does a rollout, you may or may not get to see the change. You might be in the cool group that gets the preview access right away. I mean, it wasn't that long ago they released this entire new SKU of access at $200, basically with the promise that you were going to get access to things before everybody else. Now, I'm not knocking that they rolled this out to everybody. Don't get me wrong. I just think it's a very curious turn of events how quickly they rolled this out. I mean, look, we all know this is a response to DeepSeek. That's just reality, okay? But I think this is good for all of us. I mean, the fact that we can continue to use improved models that get better at the things that we want to do each and every time is absolutely tremendous. And we have to talk about the speed because, look, I've spent quite a bit of time playing with O1 and O1-mini, but this just feels faster to me now. I don't have the quantitative measurement of that, but this is going really well. It's not a perfect model. There's always problems, right? And Sam came out a few days ago and said, "Yeah, we're looking at this." His response was very much in coincidence with the release of DeepSeek, right? Look at there, January 23rd. He says, and it's coming, right? And there's going to be tons of O3-mini usage. So this didn't come out of left field, but to disassociate this with DeepSeek, I think would be a huge mistake. So I thought what we'd start with tonight was just let's go look at kind of what we've talked about just over the last few hours with this O3 release, because man, the news is coming lightning fast. I've been playing with it, but lots of other people have been playing with it too. And some of the things that I've seen in just these first few hours is really impressive. Whether or not you think this is holistically better than where we've been in the past with the OpenAI models, or even in competition with Anthropic and some of the other big players, I do think that this bears your attention and you should be aware of what's going on. And as things have been shared over the last couple of days, what we're seeing is some really astounding numbers on the benchmarks. If you look back at where we were with DeepSeek R1, well, one of the things of DeepSeek R1 coming out was basically DeepSeek was saying, look, we are not beating O1, but the way that we operate is really fast and the scores are really good. And I think that is another important data point for us to carry forward. Realistically, it doesn't have to beat all of the benchmarks for it to be something that is really of value. And I think OpenAI sort of put a pin in that today in their release. So let's jump over to the OpenAI release document. And one of the things that I want to call out in these benchmarks is that they have created these sort of three classifications. We've got low, medium, and high. And across the various benchmarks, what we're seeing is that the scores are different. They may not be widely different. In the case of this competition math test, 60 versus 79.6 is a pretty substantial difference. I mean, if you're a college student, a 60 is a D and a 79.6 is nearly a B. So that's a pretty substantial distinction in quality between the two. But basically what they're understanding is that they can kind of triangulate. Now, how are they doing this across low, medium, and high? Well, of course, OpenAI is keeping things behind the curtain. They're not revealing that, but there's certainly some optimization, and perhaps the term of the week is distillation. So are they doing some additional work to distill the model? We know that they've been working on O3 for quite some time. When they announced it, they said they were going to be making Mini available. So again, nothing about Mini being released at some point this year was a secret. So that's not really a surprise. But the time frame and the coordination with which they launched that, I think, is what I was really most astounded by. They are also releasing this across the APIs. In terms of rolling that out, they have put it across all of their API capabilities, but only for usage tiers 3 through 5. So if you're using those APIs and you're not in those tiers, you may have to wait a little bit longer. Also, they are making this available starting today, including team and pro users. But enterprise is going to have to wait a few days, perhaps a whole month. I'm not an enterprise user of ChatGPT, so I'm delighted to not be affected by that. It is interesting to see how quickly that is rolling out. Typically with enterprise offerings, there are additional considerations that have to be taken under. And when OpenAI released O3 today, one of the things that they did is they took away O1 mini. So they are retiring some capabilities and replacing them with different capabilities. And that could also be a part of that enterprise subscription, because it's not uncommon for enterprises to rely on a set of features and require a certain amount of time before changes are made. No word specifically on how they're going to manage that model change out in enterprise, but it's very likely there's some legal agreements that are in place that have to be considered for doing that. The thing I'm most delighted about with this O3 mini change is that they are significantly upping the number of messages per day. So I've been able to spend a couple of hours with it doing a variety of tasks that I've not hit the limit yet. And that's a nice thing, because I'm much more experimental with it when I feel like I'm not running up against the wall. So really, really good things that have happened there. And I'll admit to you, when they made the announcement today, I kind of had to change my plans a little bit. I was really thinking about covering the DeepSeek R1 release, and I spent a lot of time working with that on my local device because I was using a distilled version of DeepSeek to play with it just on a local device. I happened to be traveling at the time, and it was really beneficial for me to be able to run that model locally on a device while I was in an airplane. That is one of the downsides to these cloud models. Uh, we're still holding on to this cloud model of the bigger, more complicated models that you can run with your subscription and let the cloud provider manage. But that is one of the things I was most excited about with the release of some of the DeepSeek models. Honestly, I have been running models locally on systems for quite some time, but I was really excited about the quality I was getting from the distilled model running on Quinn. So I'm going to save that conversation for running it locally for another video, because I do think that that's really interesting. And it's probably time to revisit the original video that helped to really launch the channel. And that was leveraging GPT for all with your own private documents on your own computer. And you can do that with tools like DeepSeek R1 and their combination of the distilled model with Quinn 2.5. But some really exciting things. Let's get back into what others have been discovering with O3, because I think there's some really exciting things here. A lot of comparisons are being made between the two. And so that's kind of the next segment that I want to cover here is, what are people discovering about O3-mini versus DeepSeek R1? Here we have another illustration of Python coding. And this is something that I'm very excited about because I spent many years of my career. I mean, to build something like this by hand would have taken me quite a few hours. I'm not a graphics genius. I mean, look, I studied a lot of COBOL in college, right? Because it was about business reports and not graphics. I'm not a game developer, and that's probably not a territory I should be in. But being able to take this complex idea and write a couple sentences and have it turn into a Python program still blows me away. And if you look at the comparison between the two, honestly, from a gravity and friction standpoint, O3-mini wins this hands down. There are definitely some things going on with the bouncing around of the ball in the DeepSeek example that it's close to gravity, but it doesn't look right. If it's climbing the wall, there's something not right there. But you do not see that with the O3-mini example. So we're getting some deep comparisons here. Is it phenomenal that O3 is beating DeepSeek R1? No, I really don't. But I do think it's important for us to weigh these different elements. Now, I will tell you that I have seen a number of posts and stories over the last week or so regarding the DeepSeek model, the details around what it was trained to do, how it is potentially really trying to just get that attention by having a very low cost. And there are some potential concerns that some have around what that means. When you look at the deployment of DeepSeek and how quickly it gained attention, how many people were using it, I definitely think that that is worth some attention. It was earlier today, I saw a story about the likelihood of the level of compute that was required to build that model. And it is a much larger number than we were talking about at the beginning of the week. All of those stories that hit the news about why it was affecting stocks like NVIDIA to such a great degree. And I will tell you, I have been reticent to use the online DeepSeek service. I have been very cautious about the information that I have connected to that tool. I've done quite a bit of exploration with it, but I've done it all with things that I don't have any concerns about in terms of that information getting out or being compromised. And that too was another interesting story, which we'll save for another time. But if you are trying to make a decision, should I use DeepSeek R1 or should I use O3-mini? Boy, isn't it great? Because one of the things that OpenAI did is that today, as a part of the release, you can choose to select reason in the message composer, and it's available to you for free. So if you're trying to make the decision, do I use DeepSeek or do I use O3-mini? I think o3-mini is really the better choice. And because I do have that OpenAI subscription already, I'm already paying them my money. I had some thoughts about, should I let that go? But honestly, I think OpenAI now with me has a pretty good track record of if somebody releases something good, they have something hidden behind their back that they're ready to pull out and share with the world. I have mixed feelings about, continuing to endorse that behavior, but I get a lot of other value out of the services I get from OpenAI. So I'm not going to change what I'm doing for now, but it is a consideration. If free is the only price that you're willing to pay, then you have to look around and see what the options are. And I would definitely say that O3 is a very good choice. They're not clear about the limitations on this though. So buyer beware, how much are you going to be able to select reason? Well, that's not entirely clear. And I have not tried it on the free side. Um, so it remains to be seen exactly how much we're getting with that free reasoning switch. The other interesting tidbit that we've learned about this is that as OpenAI has been talking about it, I didn't save the post and I should have, but Sam Altman was actually discussing that they are going to be adopting what they have seen with DeepSeek in terms of the thinking. That chain of thought detail is going to be more forthcoming in the models. And if I jump over and we start looking at some of the things that I've been trying out, it's actually very clear that there is more that's being shown. It's more accessible in O3 than I've noticed it being before. So I think they're already beginning to see an impact there. One of the things that I had the joy of playing when I was in my younger days, we had this great tank game called Scorched Earth, and I thought I'd give it a shot and see what it would come up with. The good news is it did come up with a tank game, but it's entirely text based. I was kind of hoping for a Python graphic game, and that's not what I got. But it did a lot of thinking in o3-mini High about how it was going to build out this gaming experience. And here you can see that it's giving me details on exactly what it's piecing together for putting together that experience. And I definitely prefer that. That was probably the most astounding reaction that I had to DeepSeek R1 when it came out, was just getting to see the thinking is a really amazing thing to see, because there is so much that goes on in the background. And we've talked about this idea of explainability in AI for quite a long time, where it does these amazing things, but we're not quite sure how it's getting there. It's very clear that that is the trend going forward. And I think that this is really valuable for you and I, because now we can do some more advanced things, leverage the power of the artificial intelligence, but also learn while we're doing it, right? Because these are tools that you can use to help you think about a problem, and anything you can do to improve your own thinking process, I think is a really valuable way to use these tools. Yeah, we get to have a lot of fun with it, building games and doing some more advanced mathematical things, but giving ourselves the opportunity to learn in this situation, I think, is one of the biggest risks that we have with AI. While a lot of folks are talking about the concept of AGI and ASI, artificial superintelligence, where it's so smart and learns faster than us and could potentially take over the world. Well, we're still likely going to be able to pull the plug out of the wall if things go sideways. But the thing that you cannot replace is what you've learned and being able to apply to those experiences. We have seen with paradigm after paradigm change, where when a class of people that is skilled at doing something is eliminated with automation, that skill begins to disappear almost immediately. And that is the concern. So don't let that happen to you. Take your skill set, continue to build what your capabilities are. Use this AI to get ahead, right? Not only be an excellent user of AI, but use it to enrich who you are. So back to the game of Scorched Earth. I went in here. It spent a good couple of minutes. It gave me a good Python program, and of course, I dropped over to try it out and see exactly what it would do. And I ran it in Python. And if you can see here in my window at the bottom, it's given me a choice of 5 weapons. I can choose. I'm going to choose the bazooka, and I'll choose my firing angle. We'll do 45 degrees, and we'll do maximum power and just see what happens. And look at that. It wiped out everybody in the first turn. All of the AI shot each other up, and an AI won the game. So it absolutely did work. I did absolutely no programming whatsoever, and it built a 250 line program, and that's pretty substantial from straight up Python. And look, I'm not a Python expert yet. I've gotten really good at writing Python on my own, but I can honestly tell you that it would definitely take me more than a minute to come up with all of this. And it did a very good job. It built out arrays for quotes. So we're not talking about just functional code here. We're talking about code that you can manipulate. It's a very good starting point that allows you to build on top of it. So you can start with an idea. Now, if you're a non-coder, you can continue to work with the AI tools to modify that. But what I like to do is get my code settled, and then I'm going to use a tool like GitHub Copilot to help me modify the code and increment it, build those classes and libraries out so that my code is more organized and executable. And this is what's really great about this, is that now my starting point is moved a little bit further along because of O3. And of course, with the announcements that the other providers gave, I can already choose o3-mini in my GitHub Copilot for what I'm going to use, which is really absolutely amazing. And I've got a lot of things in my way here. But if I go to my GitHub Copilot chat, I'll just show it to you here. If we go down to our tool here, you can see that they've already made the choice available for me in GitHub. So not only can I generate it from the get-go with o3-mini, but I can continue to iterate that. And what's really great about a tool like leveraging Copilot is I can do all of my folder structures, and I can work with it there. So it's much faster to iterate and improve the code as we go along. But let's look at some of the other examples. Let me pop back over to Twitter for a minute, because this one is probably my favorite of all of the generations that I've seen, leveraging this ability to generate code. Now, one of the guys that I follow on X is AK, and he's actually the guy that's done the daily papers. And so I've read a lot of AI papers thanks to his recommendations. But he's got a couple of tools that he's been using, a heavy use of the web GUI Gradio, and he's using that also to help him generate things. And so he's put in a request for a script that has the balls bouncing around in 3D, and then it's implemented in JS, and then he's got it so that it will generate and run it right there in the browser window. So that's a really great tool that you want to check out. But there's a lot of motion here, a lot of detail that has to be captured, and of course it's got to be bounded inside the box. So I thought this was really a great example to start off with. This is one of the very first ones that I saw come across in my feed today. Of course, we're seeing all sorts of distilled models that are in the nomenclature now, as the DeepSeek has affected so much in our universe this week. And I think I'm fully expecting that we're going to see some actual further distillation commentary and availability from OpenAI, because I think this is going to be an unavoidable thing going forward. And if you saw any of my social media this week, you might have seen that that's one of the takeaways that I took from DeepSeek R1, was that we're going to be dealing with much smaller models. We're going to be talking about distillation a lot more oftenly. And this thinking mode is really going to make a big difference. But let's talk about it. Excuse me. Let's talk about one of the other astounding things that happened with AI. Ethan Mollick has done a great job of covering the AI space from the get-go. He's like one of the early folks that was writing about generative AI. He's got a book out there that I would 100% recommend if you're looking for a good book on generative AI, take a look at Ethan Mollick's book that's been on the bestsellers list for quite some time already, and really helping you think about how you can leverage this and turn this into an advantage for you. But the example he shared with us using o3-mini High, leveraging this Twiggle dot app to make use of the shaders. And he's tried this before and it's not ever worked. The result has not been good, but the result came out very high quality this time and really useful. And this has not been possible with any of the previous models from OpenAI or the other competitors. And Ethan tends to get access to the better things earlier on because he is so well known in the space and has such great ways of demonstrating the technology and testing it out. The other interesting piece here is that there's been a lot of organizations that have been leveraging these advanced models for building applications and features inside of their apps. And when we look at the scores that we're getting across the board, we have to contend with this comparison between DeepSeek now and where we were with 4.0. And when you see DeepSeek now is getting better numbers with R1 than 4.0, well, that's something that has to be addressed. So I really do believe that this is a major driver behind what we saw. And you see the same comparisons are happening here, right? What can I do with DeepSeek R1 in coding? What does that look like when we get to tools like O3? So some other major examples that we saw with O3, I thought this was a really great example of some of the more advanced things that you can do, because the other challenge that we are going to continue to have going forward is how do we test these out? How do we validate if it's any good or not, right? We've got to sit down and think about what are some additional tests that we can perform. This fellow Cole was sharing what he put together, which was tell me the tortoise and hare story, but when you tell the story, take the last letter of the previous word and make that your first letter of the next word. And it thought about this for 8 minutes and 25 seconds. So this was actually a really good challenge. And I don't know, is this something that we're going to carry forward as we're doing these tests? This could be really interesting. I tried to come up with a couple of ideas myself. The Python games were very popular for the discoveries that were being made today. This guy, Angry Tom, had a good idea to put the snakes together, and then he was collecting a bunch of other examples that others were sharing. I thought this one by Aidan Clark, this one was probably my favorite because I've spent so many years of my life building websites and web applications, and he basically asked it to create a clone of Twitter in Python, and implement it, make it look decent, and then let me try it out. And so he made a video, and he's able to sign up for an account. It's got the form fields that you fill in the information. You sign up for the account. It lets you post. You type something in, and all of this works. And this is the first shot of this app. So really impressive and complete work being done here. And of course, the amount of time it takes for this to be produced is really the part that's mind-boggling here. So you can just imagine what's going to come out of these capabilities. And because O3 came out so quickly, we also need to talk about the API prices, because ultimately when we're drawing that comparison to DeepSeek, we have to talk about what that looks like. So I had Perplexity help me out with this one because I was running out of time. I spent so much time playing with O3, I ran out of time to complete the research. So I went over to Perplexity and I said, all right, where are we with the API pricing? And this is really interesting. When you look at where we are with o3-mini and the input and the output tokens, we're still very much levered toward output tokens because that is the more expensive part from an inferencing standpoint. But when we look at where we are with DeepSeek versus o3-mini, it's still quite quite a distinction, right? But here's the thing. When we look at where we are in terms of the cost falling off, it's dramatically cheaper than we were before, right? We're at a 93% reduction from O1's $15 and $60 pricing. So DeepSeek has absolutely disrupted the pricing here. And, I don't know where we're going to be going forward with this. I suspect that DeepSeek is still going to continue to attract a lot of attention because it is so dramatically cheap. But some of the things that I've seen over the last week that concern me are some of the concerns around the disclosure of information behind the model because it's so-called open source, but there's still a lot of details that have not been revealed. And there's also some early indications, still unconfirmed in my view, that perhaps there are some additional things that are being thrown into the responses that are less accurate or less valuable, or perhaps even malintentioned. There were some accusations I read earlier this week thrown around indicating that DeepSeek was actually injecting libraries and included files that were noticeably vulnerable. So just be aware of those conditions. Sometimes you really do get what you pay for. But honestly, being able to use the most incredible model at a 90% reduction in price is absolutely astounding. And so if you're building anything, if you're doing work on your own, you need to take a good hard look at o3-mini. Whether or not you think that this is a real groundbreaking update, it's definitely worth a look going forward. And then really where I want to close out the discussion is that as we're talking about these latest models that are available and what's possible, I want you to think about what it is that you want to achieve, because the biggest challenge here isn't what it's capable of, it's what it can do for you. And that's where we get into, I want to close out the discussion with where we are with mistakes and then jump into questions. I want to thank you all for joining the conversation today. I really love playing with these tools and sharing the delight with you as we go through it. But don't be afraid to get out there and play with it. This one is totally free. Like, go get an account, start working with it. There's nothing to lose. And if you're not sure where to start, but you think you need more power, hey, go play with DeepSeek for a little while, right? Just be careful about what you plug into it. You can learn from that tool just like you can learn from any tool. And there's a ton of opportunities for you there. Really, really amazing time for us to go and make some great mistakes. All right. Thank you all for joining. And I want to give you guys a chance to chime in with any questions. If you're enjoying the channel and you're not already subscribed, I'd love for you to do that. Don't be shy. Love to hear from the audience during the live chat. And of course, you can always comment, and I'm available on social media. Love hearing from those of you that have been reliably showing up for the live and watching the videos on the various platforms. I am streaming across multiple different platforms. X, LinkedIn, and YouTube is what I've been sticking to lately because that seems to be working well for everyone. And then, of course, if you have anything you've seen and you're like, wow, man, I'm really curious about that. I'd like to learn more, but nobody's talking about it. Hey, let's talk about it here. We're all about making mistakes. We're all going to learn something together from the experience, no matter what. And I really appreciate hearing so much detail from what it is that you're interested in, because that's how we succeed together, right? You watch the show because you're interested. I get to help you out, and we're all better for it. And we've got the social channels that facilitate that. And I got some questions coming in, some comments. Links Vero, hey man, thank you for calling out that the font is a little hard to see. I'll pay better attention to that next time. Criticism is always welcomed. If we can make some mistakes and get better about it in the process, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I'll pay better attention to that as we go forward. Thank you so much. Got some questions coming in. E. Rosner is asking, what's the most impressive output that you've had? Well, I will tell you, there's definitely been some ones that I was unimpressed with. what I was impressed with today was, going back to that, how fast was the rollout? Well, it seems like the OpenAI app that runs on my desktop tends to be updated a little late. That did not happen today. I'm still waiting for folders to show up. If I go to the web version of ChatGPT, all of my folders are there. Still don't have it in the app, but by golly, I can choose o3-mini high and o3-mini right out of the gate. So they fixed that. So I was very impressed with that output, that they made it available everywhere very quickly. Honestly, one of my more favorite outputs, I was doing sort of a run through of various games, and I asked it to build me a moon lander, and it's definitely not perfect, but I really liked the implementation that it did. And I can play the lunar lander game, and I asked it to include an instance of the US flag on the layout, and it's not 50 stars, right? But it conceptualized the idea, and I didn't give it a lot to work with. And I asked it to do something that was definitely not in the typical request bank. One of the things about some of the social media coverage, especially when it comes to the games, like the game of Snake and Tetris and some of the others, that code is out there and could be found. So one of the concerns I have about just asking it to do the run of the mill writing the code is you're never quite sure what the training might be on that. The one that I was not impressed with was Pong. And if we run Pong here, I mean, it did a good job of illustrating the ball. There's absolutely no controls for me to run my paddle at all. And it does this weird thing where the ball runs along the paddle when it actually hits it. It does keep score. Um, I've never been able to score because I can't move the paddle. So, I mean, it was a complete implementation. And honestly, I can't tell you that I would have done a better job of the version 1. Like, this is the totally I didn't change anything. This is out of the gate, zero shot, came up and did a pretty good job. So when you see something like this, you're like, okay, well, clearly that's not a set of code that's in the training set, right? Because it did some things that were definitely unique to that instantiation of the code. But I was kind of neat to see that it did work out of the gate, and I had fun with that. Some of the other things that I've been experimenting with, just asking it questions and seeing that deep thought. The scorched earth and the amount of thinking it did when I gave it those few requirements was really interesting. And I have a lot more exploring to do, and there's a lot of things that I'll play with that I'll kind of keep to myself. There's always frameworks and ideas that I'm considering in the background. I'm always trying to find ways to improve how I'm presenting to you in the conversations that we're having. So I'm asking questions about, what are people interested in? What's the exciting thing that's happening? And then trying to understand all of the concepts that are out there, right? Getting some of the deeper understanding of what it takes to put some of these things together. I really get a big benefit out of these models explaining the deeper AI concepts from the papers. And I plugged a paper in, and I was really astounded with the results that came out of it. But across the board, I think O3 is my favorite model right now. I still really like Anthropic a great deal because I just like the way the writing comes out of it. So if I'm trying to think through a social media post or trying to get my thoughts together for actually writing something down, Claude is still definitely in the running. But in terms of coding, I can definitely tell you that O3 is really bumped up in my book. It's been Claude until now because 4.0 has been okay, but I've just had a lot more success with Claude. And what I've seen just in these couple of hours with O3 has really, really impressed me. Another question from me, Rosner. Are we going to see DeepSeek get voice? This is kind of an interesting field, this discussion, and it's at this moment that I have to bring up the open source of OpenAI because everything that I've seen over the last week really tells me that so much of what we've benefited from with DeepSeek, we really only have because of OpenAI. Look, when you see something that somebody else does and you try to replicate it, that is a dramatically different story than doing it the first time on your own. So the two sides of that coin that I need to share with you is I really do think that DeepSeek has benefited tremendously from being able to distill information and data out of the models that OpenAI has built. There's no question in my mind that there has been at least some amount of training that came from OpenAI's models. But at the same time, DeepSeek did something very unique with the way that they put the details together. And when they published the paper, and I've shared it on social media, and I'll put a link to the release of their document. It's on GitHub. But the really unique thing about DeepSeek is they actually came up with this idea of a prompt that drove it to put this think tag in. And that to me was really phenomenal to see. And it's already had an impact on how quickly OpenAI is moving to share some of that internal thought. It's very clear that they have had some knowledge of doing that, but they've not really shared it with the rest of us. And that's one of the things that I'm kind of on edge about. Like, I kind of feel like OpenAI has been holding back on me a lot more than is really necessary. I understand why they've been doing that because there are concerns, right? I mean, from the get-go, OpenAI has seen evidence, even in research papers, that their work has been used to train others. If we go back to the very early release of Llama, and this is quite a while ago now, but when Llama got leaked, there was already some conjecture that a good portion of that Llama model was directly attributable to what they were able to take out of the GPT models. And that's going to continue to be the case, right? This distillation thing is going to become a bigger and bigger deal because I think at some point it's going to become accepted practice. So what's the motivation for OpenAI to compete with themselves? So to a certain extent, you kind of can't blame them for doing what they do to try to protect the model more. uh it's going to be wild times for us because I think we're going to see in 2025 a lot more on device capabilities. Apple's already trying to do more of that. Of course, we learned last week that has not turned out so well for them. It's been a pretty rough iPhone cycle for them, even having added some AI onto the phone and made that a selling point. They haven't sold as many of those iPhones. Only time will tell if that is the right move for them going forward. But I think when it comes down to the effort that it took for DeepSeek to turn out the model, there's definitely an iceberg situation. Links go. Your question here about the billions of dollars versus the 6 million. One of the guys that's connected to AI, they have a very well-known podcast they've been running for quite a few years. So these are personalities I followed in the tech space for years. David came out and said, look, we know that they probably spent close to $1 billion to get the equipment. So this $6 million training cost is really all in the eye of the beholder and how you're defining it. So no, I honestly, candidly, I do not think Google wanting to invest $65 billion is a mistake. And I don't think that the $6 million figure from DeepSeek is 100% genuine, honest, and forthright. I think we're going to discover there's a lot more behind that than meets the eye. We already know that they spent quite a lot more building DeepSeek V3. They have a very large cluster of compute that they're using that they did not include in the cost of training DeepSeek R1, which is the $6 million. Look, the reality is no matter how efficient the model is in inferencing, the training costs are very high. And even if, I mean, let's run it down. If the DeepSeek 6 million number is 100% accurate, and they found some fantastic way to tremendously reduce the amount of compute time and cost necessary to build the models, it just means we're going to have more models. We're going to use all of the compute that we've had. I mean, we have gone through boom and bust cycles in lots of different paradigms. What I think of in these situations is, back in the internet boom days, we had a couple of very large telecom companies that went under because they built a lot of fiber optic connections that they didn't get to use. And that led to this massive build out and explosion of e-commerce. So the net benefit to all of us is going to be positive, right? If this compute winds up being spare, we'll find great ways to use it and it will be cheaper. Yes, it is absolutely possible that companies could go under. We could see the likes of Google and OpenAI and Microsoft regret building out all of this compute capacity and even, signing contracts with nuclear power providers to turn nuclear power plants back on to power them. Any of these could be a mistake. And I think that's a good question to ask, quite honestly. But when we look at the overall benefit to society, look, if Google's going to throw a few $1 billion at something, they still have the room for that in their ad revenue model. I think someday in the future that may not be the case. But hey, look, if ad revenue doesn't work out on search, we still have YouTube, and there's a lot of opportunity here. I get to be a benefactor of that. When my show gets out and gets published, I do turn on the AdSense revenue and I get a few dollars. It's not paying my bills. But as the channel continues to grow, that could become a potential source of revenue for me, so I can do some more interesting things with the channel. And so I think net to society, all of this investment that we're seeing in AI is going to benefit everyone. And I'm very much of the attitude that we're going to find new ways to leverage this technology in positive ways. In my view, technology is neither good nor evil. It is entirely in the hands of the person or people that are using and controlling that technology. And the reason why we're here talking about AI mistakes is so that we can all take advantage of this, because the more of us that are out there doing the right things with it, it makes it harder for those people out there to do the wrong things with it. And it's our responsibility to do the right thing with it. So with that, I'm going to let you all off the hook tonight. Listen, really appreciate you joining. So many great people out there watching the show. Thanks for joining, and go have yourselves a great week. Go make some AI mistakes, and we'll see you next time.